What's happening, guys? Welcome to the David F. Haas podcast. I'm your host, David F. Haas. I'm here in the studio with my wife, the camera girl, Bree, today, and my good friend, Alyssa Trittler. Alyssa and I have been working together for some time, and we've kind of been on the path together. And she was coming to groups way back in the day when I was hosting them at my house with my friend Andrew. And then when I merged into having my own groups, Alyssa joined that, and so she's been really influential to the group and holds a really important space for the group that we have. But her journey's like been this really interesting one. She's already in the field of giving and with her job, and but now she's making a transition as well to becoming a pre and postnatal counselor for women after she kind of went through some struggles with her pregnancies. And so I think her journey is something that a lot of women for sure are going to get something from. But anybody that is on the path to spiritual growth, it's always just good to hear other people's perspective. And so that's essentially what the podcast is dedicated to, is to bringing spirituality into the light and kind of like demystifying it, and not being so like woo woo out there, and just kind of saying, hey, this is the process and this is what worked for me, and that may click with somebody else and they say, oh, that is exactly the same thing that I'm suffering with as well. So welcome to the podcast. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy day. I know you're pregnant again, so another part of the journey, which is actually something we should get into within the group as well. But let's just kind of start from the beginning. When we first kind of started coming together with groups with Andrew at my house, and we were just joking about that. It's like people thought we were having seances when we were doing healing treatments at my house, because my house had these big large windows. But like, let's kind of start about what kind of interested you in healing and spiritual growth. And what kind of drew you towards, attending those groups back in the day?
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. So first off, I think that where we kind of started our journey and how I started with the group was that I adopted your guys' first foster dog, Mac. Shout out to Mac for bringing, I guess he started me on this journey. I think that I had come to your guys' house for a meet and greet with Mac, and you and Bree were going to see Andrew, and you had kind of given me a little blurb about what you were doing that night, and I was like, oh, I want to do that. I had done the normal like Reiki, yoga, I was familiar with meditation, different things like that, so I was interested in kind of what more there was to learn about spirituality, which I really had no idea that there was going to be such a big process for me. So we used to go to Andrew's, and we went to your house. I think that in the beginning for me, I was ready for the journey, but I wasn't really ready for the journey, so to say. So I did a lot of, like, I was going to group, I was doing all the stuff that we were doing. But then I think that it was almost a couple of years after that I had like my big crash, my big like kind of awakening to the need for me to make some pretty significant changes and start to recognize some different things that were going on for myself. Yeah,
and I think that's where I was actually just thinking about that today. I think that's where it happens for a lot of us, is when we hit like a bottom of some sorts, right? And for me with like diet and stuff, it kind of just happened over the Easter weekend there. I ate so much food, like my stomach was sore, and I was like, this is ridiculous. Like I gotta make a change. And so I think that's what happens for a lot of us, is that we hit some sort of bottom, and bottom looks different for everybody. With people that are addicted to drugs and stuff, it could be like being homeless or whatever. But for other people, it could be as simple as just like, having trouble in our marriages or with relationships. And yeah, so I think you hit like a good point, was and I'd like you to expand on that a little bit, is like when you said you were ready, but you weren't ready. And I think what you had gotten wrapped up in then, from an outsider's perspective, was you kind of got wrapped up in all of the spiritual, like, I don't want to call it mumbo jumbo, but like, you hear about like all this spiritual stuff, and you can get into like crystals and essential oils, and even meditation is like, I think was just a key element to spiritual growth. But even meditation, you can get wrapped up in guided meditations, and there's so much information, and sometimes you get so wrapped up in all of that, you miss the thing that is the most important about spiritual growth, which is the actual work. And that's what I want to kind of get into. So why don't you just expand on how you said you were ready, but you're not ready, I guess.
Yeah, I think that for me, I was understanding the concepts. I was marginally implementing them, we'll say. At best, I was dedicated to going to the group, but I wasn't always dedicated to doing the work outside of the group. And I think that part of that was because I wasn't really ready to look at my shadows. I wasn't really ready to look at the depth of what was required for me to heal. So I was kind of like a surface level spiritual like person. And I agree with you where I was like, I'm going to go buy these crystals and these oils and all these things that are going to make me better. But I wasn't ready and prepared to like jump into the deep and like the depth of it, I think is where I was. So I had an openness and a want to learn, and I loved the hands-on healing that we would do and all of that kind of stuff. I was ready to do the outside stuff. I wasn't ready to do like my own stuff. Yeah, I think is what it was, right?
No, I think that's perfect.
So then I think that what it reached a point for me was that like whatever happened with our group, I can't even remember like what all kind of how that even process went. But for me, I got engaged. Our life was super busy. And I kind of hit this point of just like severe loneliness. Like you said, had a whole bunch of relationships in my life just kind of start to crumble underneath of me. And a lot of like deflection, not being able to take ownership, not being able to recognize like the role that I played in it all, which ultimately cost me a lot of different relationships at that time of my life. And I think that what ended up happening for me was that I had these different things go on. I found out that I was pregnant with my first son. And about 6 months postpartum after having a baby in the midst of COVID and all of these like lonely, so much time by myself, where I finally hit this breaking point of like, oh my God, I need to make a change. Like I need to go back to like my dedication to this for myself. Like I needed to find something that would hold me responsible to come inwards rather than just sitting here and doing Reiki treatments on people or doing healing sessions or having crystals all around my house and whatever. Although I think that those are all great, it was time for me to kind of turn in. And I think that the journey into parenthood for me was what really made me recognize that I wanted to do better for me because I wanted to do better for my kids. Yeah.
And I think that is a great turning point for most people is when they have a kid and they basically be like, I don't want to fuck my kid up. Yeah. And when you realize that, when you have like, and it's essentially as like a higher calling, then, you get out of this selfishness. And, Jordan Peterson's been kind of ranting and raving lately about like how you don't really grow up until you have a kid. And, I think that is true. Like, I think the moment that I had a kid, even though I talk a lot about like there wasn't this instant connection for me, but there was this moment of like, oh, I'm in charge of somebody else now, and I better make sure that my shit is fixed so that I don't project all of that onto this little innocent perfectly innocent being. So yeah, I think that's really a great takeaway is like when you have kids, it does allow you to begin to start this spiritual step towards finally fixing your own shit.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. I think that for me, when I look back at the beginning of Riker's life, I think that sometimes I'm like, I'm much better now than I was before, obviously, because I've done the work on it. But I had so much guilt just about the way that I was acting and the way that it was basically like my needs weren't being met the way that I wanted them to be. But they weren't being met because I wasn't able to like actually look at myself and see what was going on for me internally. Yeah. And so this like big adjustment into becoming a parent and this complete flip of my life and my husband's life, that's definitely like the turning point for me. So then I think it was around 6 months postpartum that I rejoined your group, and we were doing everything was virtual. Yeah. And that was for me quite literally like going back to like the group is what like changed my life forever. Like and has been like such a significant which has had like a significant impact on me as like a human and kind of pulled me into like places I never thought that I would be. Like my life is not anywhere where I thought it would have been if you would have talked to me almost 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, right?
Yeah. So it's like, and 2 years sounds like a long time, but really to like undo programs that, you know, you've had your whole entire life. It's like, really, it's not that long of a period, you know? And I you know, the one thing, as I kind of listen to you talk, you know, the one thing that I think was, you know, a big shift for you was this idea of, you know, in my course, I call it like radical responsibility, and like just being able to turn everything back on yourself and see your role in everything that has ever transpired in your whole entire life. And you can hear that concept, like you can hear it over and over again, but it's until you have this like moment where you go like, oh, this is all my fault. And it's kind of harsh in some ways to see that, but when you realize it's all your fault, you also realize that you can change everything because you have the power, whereas before you had given away the power. So like that's what I think I want you to go into a little bit is you know, what were the major turning points for you on this path? You know, and I think for sure, I think one of the biggest ones for you is this radical responsibility. And I think that's still part of your process, is learning to take that responsibility and bring it in. And then, you know, you can expand from there if anything else comes to mind.
Sure. So yeah, radical responsibility is like definitely like the term that like it changed me. So I think that once I was able to grasp like the actual depth of what that meant, and being able to like understand that like in this healing process there is like a harshness that like you have to be able to be prepared for, to deal with yourself, and know that the other thing that like with radical responsibility, another thing that you had said and that I've learned from you is this whole notion of like, I didn't know because I had never gone through it. So I'm being so harsh on myself. I'm turning away from being able to heal all these wounds of these times in my life when I was just doing the best that I could. I didn't know any better. So along with being able to understand the radical responsibility and understand and have compassion for myself at the same time, that I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have the guidance. I didn't have the answers. I didn't have the depth of knowledge that I did once I started more into the group. And then I think that what happens is once you recognize I didn't have all of this, now I know it, now I need to take responsibility for it. And that's the hard part. And for me, it just kind of started to flow for me. Like, I had a major break in a relationship in my life. And once I was able to just kind of stop needing that other person to give me anything, once I was able to just say, you know what, like, I love that person, I need them back in my life, I just need to own it. Like, I need to just own it fully and with no expectations back. That relationship ended up coming back into my life in such a beautiful way. And it really was kind of like that, I know that we don't always like to use the word proof, but it was the proof for me that like this is it. This is what I got to do. So then for me, what kind of started to unfold was that I was able to start to filter through these like different relationships in my life and these different scenarios in my past, in my present, and being able to kind of be okay with sometimes knowing that like I'm not a perfect person. And that was like huge for me. And then moving into a journey of some self-love as well. So then I guess just kind of bringing it forward, for me, what happened was that I was doing all this work, and I had found myself in the ER one day. I was having an ectopic miscarriage. Didn't know I was pregnant. Just kind of a flyby from a nurse. You're pregnant. And then the next thing I know, I've miscarried this baby. And for me, that was like another really big moment in time for me, of just pure like devastation, because I wanted to have this baby so bad. And then a recognition that like, I don't really know where I'm supposed to go from here. I think that one of my biggest supports was our group, and really helping me to like move through things, but then also still being able to keep falling back into this like responsibility of like, and not responsibility in the sense that I caused my miscarriage in any way, just a responsibility of my own feelings and being able to move through that pain and discomfort, and using it as like a stepping stone. Now I can look back on it and look at it as I can look at it as a gift that was given to me for my life's journey. So then my husband and I went on a journey into trying to conceive again. We had a second miscarriage, what the doctors would call like a normal miscarriage, with quotations around it. And that was, again, a very difficult space for me to be in. But I think that what was different for me that time, kind of going into things, was that I was starting to have like an understanding that me not continuing on a journey to healing myself was what was preventing me from becoming pregnant, which was really difficult to kind of understand and accept. So around that time of my second miscarriage, I had kind of decided that I needed to start making like pretty massive shifts. The job that I do full time is a very stressful, very involved position. And so I decided that doing that full-time and part-time wasn't going to work for me. So then it kind of brought me to deciding, you know what, I think I'm going to open a private practice and start offering support to women in both the pre and postnatal phases of motherhood, like looking at how can I best support women who are on a fertility journey, helping to support women experiencing loss of all different sorts, mainly because I had been through it and I knew the depth of like where that can go in your, like within yourself, and being able to just provide support that I didn't feel like I had access to. And then as well as once becoming a mom, learning to navigate this whole motherhood thing with grace and acceptance, but also continuing to hold myself as a priority. So I opened my practice last year in May, and it took off way better than I could have ever expected. I'm coming up on like almost a year now. Yeah. And I love it. Like I absolutely love it. Obviously I'm about to go off on a mat leave now, but I just have like full trust that this is what I meant to do. And then kind of jumping forward a little bit. Obviously I keep talking about I'm 7.5 months pregnant. Another major milestone, I think, for me was when we had all gone on our retreat and we had done, I think that you guys had done like a healing treatment or something on me. And there was something, I think that you had said it, Dave, that like, I don't believe that I deserve to be pregnant. And I was like, that just like kind of rocked me, where I was like, what do you mean I don't think I deserve to be pregnant? And after kind of exploring that and having that weekend to really just kind of like break it down and have like the space dedicated and the time dedicated for me to just explore this and let go of the fear and the anger and the guilt and the shame and all of these different things that kind of come along with the loss, I literally got pregnant. I had to have gotten pregnant either like that week leaving, or I was pregnant and that little baby was clearly deciding if they were going to stick with me or not for the long haul. That was when it shifted for me. And it was just kind of, again, like these big moments that have just been proof for me that like by continuing to show up for myself, even if that means like I don't meditate every single day, like I don't read every single day, I don't do all of this stuff every single day. For me, it's not possible in my life. I work a full-time job, I work a part-time job, I'm a mom of a toddler, I'm 7.5 months pregnant, like my life is full. But the fact is that I just hold myself accountable to these different themes that I've started to bring into my life. Yeah.
And I think that you hit the nail on the head with respect to like the pregnancy journey. And ultimately, you know, in talking about the gift that was given to you through the miscarriage, but also the gift that is going to be given to so many other people, because that was kind of like the spark that, moved you into like wanting to start this private practice. And there's a big gap in the market for, that type of counseling, that specific. And I think, when you talked about it at the retreat, and, the number one thing that was coming up was like you were doing all of this stuff to like get pregnant, you were like monitoring your cycles and doing all the and there was the energy and the desire and of like desire and wanting that was actually like putting a block between you and actually allowing it to happen. And I think I remember we were on a phone call once or something, and there was just this like this shift that happened inside of you that was like, when it happens, it happens, and like I'm just gonna throw away all of the tracking devices and all of this, and just let it unfold. And so in that, it was like a surrendering over to the fact that like, hey, like I'm just gonna get out of my way here and allow the universe to do what it does, and that's essentially what happened. And also in the creation of the retreat that we did with our group, there is so much that happens when you allow yourself to like just have this space. It's like, and that's why, that was the creation of Lungo Vito, was essentially like to say people need a space to like just unplug. And once you have that space to unplug, then it's like, oh my God, like all the realizations and the healing, it just happens, And so we have 3 people in our group that are all pregnant right now, and and all of them in some way, shape, or form had some sort of struggle with pregnancy. And then it was just like, there was this one group meeting we had, and I remember saying this specifically, and it was like, you can have anything that you want in life, right? But the trick is you have to let go of the wanting of it, right? And it's a hard concept to kind of wrap your mind around. But I do remember that point when you just said, hey, it's going to happen when it happens. And it was like almost like a relaxing into this idea, I think is what the big shift was. And I think one of the things that's happening for you now is, even as you continue through this process and in this pregnancy, you're learning that these limiting emotions are still kind of coming up, the fear, and all of that. And so how have you been working through that stuff that's been coming up, throughout this process? I mean, you're obviously 7 months, now, so you're kind of out of the woods, but like of saying in the early stages when, after you were able to let go and allow that pregnancy just to manifest, then there was, once it manifested, and this is what happens a lot, like this is what happened with me with like success. It's like, once I got the success that I had wanted for so long by letting go of the desire, then I got the success, and then I had the fear of the success going away. Yeah. And so you went through a similar thing with, the pregnancy.
It's funny that you say that, because even I still find myself on a daily basis having to combat fear surrounding the pregnancy after like going through the losses. And I think that that's been in some ways, again, I try to look at like a lot of these things as like a gift to like keep growing, and a gift that like continues to check myself that like I have so much more work to do beyond what I've already done. So for me, when I have this like fear creep in, I think that number one, working on like the letting go technique is like huge for me, is trying to find like a moment or two to like just live in the fear, go through like the whole process. I often will do that and what exercise and then what exercise with myself, where it's like, okay, let's go there then. Like, let's go to the worst case. Where's your mind at right now? Like, let's assess kind of where you're at and like be in it for a moment and not rationalize it away. I think that that's been like a big thing for me, trying to learn that like stop rationalizing everything. Because even like when I group share sometimes, or like when we're like doing different things, I'm trying to like make a shift into like, I don't need to rationalize everything. I can just lean into my responsibility for my feelings, my emotions, what's coming up. And then also for me, it's been a lot about just having some grace, like holding grace and having the compassion for myself, that like this journey is not always on like an upward like road. Like I'm gonna have my ups and downs, and being able to say, okay, today's a really good day, I'm gonna lean into it. I'm like really gonna like find the joy in today and the excitement that I'm gonna have another baby and all of this stuff. And then if I have a day that like I wake up with fear, sometimes I just let myself ebb and flow through that day. And that's a lot of the stuff that I do with the women that I work with, is that I'm not gonna make this fear go away until I have this baby come to me. What I'm learning is that I have the ability to start to control how that fear is controlling me. So the fear is going to keep coming up because I still have so much fear things from my whole life that I haven't touched on yet. Yeah. So I'm never going to fully get rid of it, because I'm still going back into like 35 years of life of fear. Yeah,
well, don't say never, but
no, I will eventually let go of it. But the pregnancy fear, it's just all kind of like, for me, it's like, this isn't just related to my pregnancy. This is related to my whole life. So I need to be able to have compassion for myself and just lean into it And then, yeah, find the joys.
Yeah, I think that was a really good point. Is that when you're experiencing positive emotions, you want to allow that positive emotion to flow in. It's like a lot of us have shut off the positive. It's like when you learn to repress, suppress, escape, express emotions as a tool to not feel them. When you shut off the bad, you also shut off the good. And so when the good comes flowing into our lives, sometimes we don't even recognize it because we're just so used to being like, oh, here's a feeling, let me just shove it back down. And so I think that's really a really great point, is that, part of, making room for the positive is letting go of the negative, but part of letting go of the negative is allowing the positive to flow.
Yeah.
And so I think that's good. And I also believe, though, that, that fear could 100% be transcended, but you are right. It is not just when we experience fear from something on a daily basis. I was actually at Lungoviti the other day, and I was on the bobcat on the side of a cliff, and I was really experiencing fear like this. I was like, I'm going to die here. And so the reason that fear is coming up is because there is still a root of a fear of death in me, right? And so as much work as I've done, and I believe that there is no death and all of these things that I can say consciously, subconsciously, I'm still sitting in the fear. And sure, a little bit of it is just like this, just getting used to it. But what I knew I had to do in that bobcat was just keep driving the fucking thing, right? And the more I stayed in the fear, the more I stayed in the bobcat, the less and less fear it had. And by the end of the 2 hours I was in it, I was up and down the hill, and it was like nothing. And so I think this is a really important point that we need to drive home. And I think this is what would help most women that are, looking to get pregnant or are pregnant now after a struggle, is to recognize that the fear is okay. The goal of spiritual growth is not to eliminate all emotions. It's to be aware when we are in our emotions, and then in order to break free from them for good, we have to go to them. We have to lean into them. We have to say, okay, I'm scared shitless right now that I'm going to lose this baby. Let me bring that fear in. Like, just keep bringing it. Just keep bringing it. Keep feeling it until it loses its energy. And I think if people are able to do that, then that fear won't have so much power. So there's twofold. One is you need to learn to, well, step one is you need to become aware of it. I want to expand on that in a second, or have you expand on it. So you need to become aware that the emotion is there, and then you need to be able to learn how to lean into it without allowing all these thoughts to try and pull you out of it, right? Because that's what the ego is trying to do, or the mind. It's trying to protect you from that negative feeling. So it has all of these tools to pull you out of it, And so step one is awareness. So this would probably be where if I would start pretty much anyone that's, pre or postnatal struggling in any way, is what is it that you're feeling, and how do you build the tool of awareness? Because we are pretty much unconscious, all day long, right? But when we start to step outside of our thoughts or our mind, and we can start observing them, right, then we start to take back some power over the emotions and the thoughts that are essentially creating the life that we have. So it's like Hawkins always had this great quote. It's like, what you hold in mind tends to manifest. So whether it's positive or negative, whatever is in there the most is probably going to come into your life. That is like a really important piece of knowledge. That is like motivation to be like, well, I better be analyzing what is coming into my head. So a big part of the journey of spiritual growth is to begin to have a deeper awareness of what is happening in our mind. So like, what are some of the things that you think have helped you to like create that deeper understanding of like, to be able to take that step back and be like, oh, I'm in fear right now. Like, most people aren't doing that. Most people are just going to their mechanisms. So what allowed you think, to start taking that step back?
Well, I think that for me, like, first was kind of recognizing like my outward reactions, like how I was acting differently, like in a day. So if I was waking up and I'm like short fused with my son, short fused with my husband, snippy, kind of just on edge, like that would be like kind of my first like clue or like signal sign from the universe that like, girlfriend, you gotta like check yourself, right? And then in doing that, a lot of time once I'm able to kind of get silent in it and say, okay, you're ramped up right now. You're being reactive. You're being angry. You're like, all of these really like low vibrational like emotions are coming out right now. Like you're just like on this edge. What is going on? And then once I was able, like for me, that's step one of like recognizing, having that self-awareness to say, okay, this is not me. This is not how I function daily. This is not who I am on a daily basis. So now that I'm recognizing that I'm not being like authentically me. Like I'm not being myself right now. Where is this coming from? And then often I mean, because of me having these losses, I would just generally jump to, okay, what's the fear that's going on? And then kind of checking in. What I like to do with a lot of women that I work with is kind of like look at like throughout the pregnancy. Usually women have checkpoints that they have to make it through, right? You have like, if you've had a loss before, you want to make it past that loss, and then you tend to feel a little bit better. Make it through the first trimester, because this has become this like, I don't know where this all came from, but we have to make it through the first trimester and then we feel better. So that checkpoint, or whether it's like the anatomy scan, whatever these checkpoints may be, if I started to recognize I was coming up on a checkpoint that I've created in my mind, because I do truly believe that a lot of these checkpoints, we just create them. They're not actually factual. They're just based on information that we've received from, whether it's other people's stories, whether it's from these like things that have been told to us by like the by the medical system. If I was coming up on a checkpoint, then I would have a greater place to start to say, okay, one of your checkpoints is coming up. It's time for me to maybe this week make some more space and time to be super intentional about my care for myself, to be super intentional about my awareness of my emotions. For me, that was like the biggest steps in being able to say, okay, I'm acting different. Where is this coming from? And once I recognize, okay, this is fear associated with my pregnancy, am I coming up to a milestone? And now what do I need to give to myself right now? Like, what do I need to, I remember you talked once about like, it's okay to like almost like dissociate sometimes, but you have to be aware that you're doing that. Mm-hmm. So I also do that with teach a lot of the women that I work with about that like, for you to go on social media for an hour, that's okay. But you need to go into that hour of social media saying, I'm not prepared right now to like deal with all these hard emotions. I'm going to need to like deal with that after. I'm going to go into an hour of just whatever I need to do. But I need to return to this emotion. Like I need to find the space and time. And sometimes we have to do that because we have a toddler that's trying to go to bed, and when they're up and down, that's not the time that I'm going to go and sit in this deep, like emotion searching situation.
Yeah, you can't sit and meditate, you can't feel it. Yeah, so I think that's an important part. Is like you can consciously choose to escape your emotions or suppress them or avoid them or whatever that may be, but the key is to circle back and you know, and like but the thing is that we don't want to, you know, like that's the thing. It's like, you know, and you had brought up you know, when we were talking about, when you said I was into it but I wasn't ready, and then what really the shift was about like doing this inner work, and like you said, it's like it's hard, because our whole entire lives we've been avoiding these emotions and avoiding looking at ourselves in any negative light whatsoever, and we were fearful of judgments or whatever, and all of these things kept us, you know, closed off. And so when you begin to really do the deep spiritual work, you realize that you now have to deal with all that shit you've been avoiding your whole entire life, right? And so it's like, I think that would be the second part of that is one is recognizing, having the awareness, having the ability to step back and be like, and I liked what you said was like these trigger points, you know, when you know you catch yourself in a highly elevated emotional state, and then you can say, whoa, what's happening here? So it's like you recognize. You know, Andrew used to use this analogy. It's like you're on the bus of anger, and then you recognize, oh shit, I'm on the bus of anger, and all that you have to do to get off is just become aware. Then you pull the lever and you get off the bus, right? And however you decide to get off that bus, awareness alone might be enough to get off the bus. But you could also, like you say, the anger is too intense right now. I'm just going to escape, or I'm just going to, you know, suppress it for now until I have the time and the space to say, well, what was that anger really all about? Eventually you will get to a place where you're just letting go in the moment all times. But the second step is to understand what's at the root of these emotions, you know? And so it's like getting to like that core of where this all began in my life, right? Because we just keep playing out the same cycle over and over again. And so part of what we do in the group is we are kind of like examining our shadows as much as we possibly can and bringing them to the surface, so that when you're just sharing them in a safe space, you are taking back some power from them. You're kind of like bringing them up into the light, and now you're looking at them. So then when you get triggered by anger by your husband or whoever that may be, then you can be like, I know where this is connected to. I know why I'm behaving in this way. I know why I'm doing this. And that also begins to take some power back, because now you can say, okay, I still need to do the work, at this level. So like maybe like just expand upon, some of those realizations of like that deep core, like that having to look deep inside,
Yeah. Something that just came to mind to me when you were saying this, because I think that this is where I'm kind of at in my journey right now, is that like I'm learning how to now like even talk more, or I'm being able to like describe what it is that's going on for me better now. Like I feel like because of the work that I've done in understanding my emotions, understanding where these root causes are coming from, in the moment if my husband and I are not on the same page and we're having a difficult time communicating, now I'm able to say, this need is not getting met of mine, or I need to take a break because my emotions are out of whack and this isn't about you. I need to go take a minute to like figure myself out, so to say, which is like huge for me. And I think that where that kind of came from, like you said, is once I was able to kind of start really looking back at these really massive things that have happened in my life and be able to say, okay, this is a shadow that I've just kept pushing away. Like I feel like for me and my journey where I'm at is these more, so to say, superficial things that have happened throughout my life, these little shadows here and there. When I know that I'm able to conquer them and be able to kind of learn from them, grow from them, let them go, is when I'm able to share them, especially in our group, right? Yeah. But there still are some pretty massive shadows for me. I would say probably 2 or 3 that I'm still working on finding like the courage and finding the ability to like bring it forward for myself. But I feel like in this process of being able to be vulnerable, and I think that that's a really great quality of me, is I'm a pretty vulnerable person. I'm pretty willing to share most things, or be able to get deep about things and be real about it, or at least I have like a genuine want to explore what's going on. And I think that that was a big turning point for me, is that I needed to be okay with being vulnerable. Like I needed to be okay with the fact that there was going to be these hard emotions that came up, that there was going to be these difficult conversations to be had, but knowing that like the supports that I had around me, that there was like no judgment coming from them. So there was space being held for me to be that intimately vulnerable.
Yeah.
I don't know if I just answered your question,
no,
but that just kind of came to
whatever.
me
no, I think that's,
in the thought process about that.
Yeah. Like I think having a safe place, and this is like I said this in the last podcast too, but it's like, Hawkins used to say, if you don't have a problem, get one. And the reason he said that was because you're going to go into some sort of inner work, whether it's counseling, whether it's group work, or AA, NA, whatever you're going to go and get the help that you need. And so I think that's super important to have that safe space. And our group is kind of like a testing ground to air your dirty laundry. And then, as you do it and it loses its power, then you start saying it, in front of more people. And it's like, eventually you'll get to a place where, you care so little, or you have such, there's no attachment to that thing that you were once holding on, that you'll just tell anybody, you'll tell a stranger, and so, and that's the place that we're looking to get to, where we're completely free of anything that has ever, any of the traumas that ever kind of been holding us back, that are creating the stream of negative thoughts and patterns and programs that we know are not serving us. And that's like something that came to mind for you, was like, I'm just thinking, I had this flashback of like old Alyssa and new Alyssa, it's like, if you like think back to the things that you were interested in, and the motivations that you had, the lifestyle that you had, 3 years ago, to now, you're like a completely different person, right? So it's like, why don't you just, give me a rundown? I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot for this, but like, what was old Alyssa all about, and what is new Alyssa all about? You know, like,
Okay.
so give me an old Alyssa and give me a new Alyssa.
I mean, I think that old Alyssa, kind of going back to like pre-kids, was like my lifestyle was just like going and having a good time, right? And I was like, I wanted to go out, I wanted to drink, I wanted to party. I had this mentality of like work hard, play hard, and I was good at my job, I made good money, and like then I was gonna go and enjoy that success and whatnot. Whereas now for me, what's different is that I work hard, but the reward of that is completely different for me now. And the want of what I want to do with my time afterwards is completely different. For me, what's different now also is that like I value myself more than I ever did before. Back then, for me, like I didn't have self-love. I didn't have self-compassion, I didn't even really have like self-awareness. I was just kind of like this train wreck, like moseying through life. Like I was a great time, but I could also be like a really not good time. And then now I feel like what's different for me is that this just like general care about myself and this general want to be better for me, so then it ripples into my children. And for me, I want to be able to help people. And that was a big realization too that's kind of shifted in me. I remember we would always do like these different exercises about like, what do you want to do with your life? What do you want things to look like? Yada, yada, yada. And I would write out all these things, and never did I put helping people, even though I'm quite literally in the helping profession. I'm a social worker. Mm-hmm. And like that was never even in like my top 10. And now I think that we did an exercise, I think it was last week in group, where it was like, if you had no end to the amount of money that you have, what would you want to do? I like wrote this whole like plan about how I want to like help women, and that was the top of my priority. So it's just, for me, that's been like a massive shift for me. Yeah. Is just like this like want like in like the depth of my being just to help people so desperately, because I know it can be done, because I know the shifts can change, because I'm quite literally living it.
Right. Yeah. And then that's the thing that happens with spiritual growth, is once you kind of start experiencing it, you just want to kind of scream it from the rooftops and be like, and you can see people that were once who you were, and that you know that even though they're unconscious of it, they're suffering, you know? And so you want to just be able to like shake them almost and be like, no, like there's a better way, and like life can be so much better and so much more fulfilling, and, you know, there's so much more joy. But, you know, obviously the people have to come when they're ready. But, you know, if you basically follow, you know, thy will and not your will, you know, you get so much support. And you know, your private practice is an example of that. It's like, you know, you had early success with it, and you're getting all kinds of clients, and you're not even really trying. You know, they're just kind of coming. And so you know, you have a really good product that's really, you know, for service, I guess, that's really delivering for people. And because of that, it's just like organically growing, you know. And so, you know, that's what I wanted to kind of start touching upon here as we kind of come to the end of the podcast is, you know, people that are listening to this podcast are going to be drawn because I'm going to come up with some real catchy title, like How to Get Pregnant or something like that, you know, because that's what I like to do. And so, you know, let's give some real takeaways here for people that are listening to the podcast, because they know you and they know what it is that you're doing. So my guess is that people that are here that are listening are people that are either you know, trying to get pregnant or struggling with, you know, pre or postnatal stuff. And so, you know, the theme that's coming to my mind is how to get pregnant, you know, because I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, you know. You know, if you kind of scan your client list, is it people that are struggling with trying to get pregnant, or the emotions after pregnancy? What is it? 50-50, 75-25?
I would say probably like 50-50, or with a little bit of like people in pregnancy after loss. Like that's a lot. Right. That's like a big like pregnancy. What does pregnancy look like after loss? Yeah. Okay, so let's go there then. So well, let's go both, because I like both of them. So it's like, if someone, and we're gonna do this together. I'm not gonna just put you on the spot, but it's like, because we quite literally, you know, had a very non-scientific you know, study in our group where we had 3 women that struggled with pregnancy in some way, shape, or form, either had miscarriages or weren't able to get pregnant, and then
like that, through the work that we did, we're able to get pregnant. And so it's like using that as our model, right?
Yeah.
What would be our 3 to 5 takeaways that we could give women listening today, couples listening today, on how to get pregnant? And the word "get" is obviously is like a key word, but because there's probably a lot of wanting and desire in there. So that would be my first tip, would be to say the first thing that you need to do in order to get pregnant, is to recognize that there is a deep desire and wanting that is blocking you from actually getting pregnant. And the wanting is because the wanting is full of like stress and forward thinking and anxiety, and you can get pregnant without wanting to get pregnant, right? So it's like you just have sex, you're probably going to get pregnant, right? And that sounds silly, but it's like if I use it as like the scenario of when I leave this podcast, I want to go home and get to my daughter. I can really want to get home and drive like a maniac and cut people off and swerve and give people the finger, or I can just drive home. And they both have the exact same outcome. So a recognition and letting go of the want will create this sense of ease. Because you think about wanting, if you just think about that scenario I just laid out, how does driving home in that wanting look? It's like it's tense. The body's tense. Like you could feel it. How does it look good as just saying, I know I'm going to get home if I'm just driving, right? Yeah. So it's like easy. It's like you're sitting back in your chair, you're relaxed, the body's relaxed. There's a sense of knowing that you're going to get home, right? So it's like if you recognize that and you recognize that you're in desire, right? Just the awareness of that desire and that wantingness will reduce it, which may create this easing in the body that may allow you to get pregnant. So that's my number one. What's your number two?
Sure. And just to kind of like expand on that, especially for like women like dealing with infertility that are having to go to like the professionals and kind of like dealing with like these other roadblocks, like what I like that you're saying that I totally agree with is that when we're able to remove that like extreme desire and want, and you're able to like go into this knowing that this is going to be my journey, like I'm going to eventually be a mom, like I'm going to be a mom. I think that like another part of the process is just leaning into the knowing of what your journey is.
Yeah, it's almost like a surrender. It's a
sense
of
surrendering.
Surrender to me is the belief that everything that I ever need or want, for lack of better words, will be provided to me. So it's like if I'm moving towards, if I want to create a $100 million company, then, I set the intention to do that. And I recognize that the universe or God or whatever it is going to give me everything that I need to fulfill that intention, And so if you have the intention to become pregnant and you have a complete and utter trust in God or the universe, then there's nothing else to do. Right? It's just like everything will just unfold for you. Like all the people that you need to meet, you're listening to this podcast right now, which is actually a sign that the universe is giving you what you need to get to the new knowledge that you need to obtain in order to become pregnant. Like it's all happening. We just have to be in a place to, to take the blinders off, because that's what happens when we get into these, especially this would be with respect to like illness. When you get into like an illness, all of a sudden it's like, you have all these doctors and every single person and their dog is throwing information at you. This is what you need to do and this is what you need to do. But the reality is what you need to do is you need to let go of all of that. And you just need to surrender into the fact that everything that I need is going to be provided to me. And then when you really truly know that, then that's when it comes into your life. But here's the question, I guess, for you is how do you get to a place of surrender?
Well, what just came to my mind, I'm reading a book right now about like labor and delivery, because for me that's like a very scary thing for me because of what I went through with my son. And I think that part of that surrender is that we have to move ourselves away from the scariness of, you can hear a scary story about anything. Like if you want to find a scary story about getting pregnant or about staying pregnant, that is flooded throughout anywhere. What you have to be open to in the surrender is allowing people to come into your life that do have the positive stories. So in this book that I'm reading, quite literally half of this like textbook is just positive stories. And it's like, wow, that's a really different way of kind of like going into this. Is I'm going to choose to just hear the positives, because I know that the negatives are out there. I know what the reality is. I lived through 2 miscarriages. I lived through the loss. So now I'm going to choose to be surrounding myself with the knowledge, and I'm going to surround myself with the openness to bring people into my life that, yes, I've had miscarriages. However, now I'm pregnant. And I think that just that shift is how you kind of surrender.
Yeah. And this is in human nature. This is an ego process of like, constantly looking at the bad or looking at the cracks. It's like, you can have a beautiful $1 million home on the water, and it can be perfect, but then there's like one crack in the ceiling, and that's what everyone focuses on, right? Or a better example maybe is you're in school and you get 99 out of 100 on a test, and the first thing you do is flip to the one that you got wrong. And it's like, it's in our nature, it's in our DNA to focus on the bad, and that's how we survived, right? But there's this recognition that we don't need to do that. We can allow the good to come in. So yeah, it's like surround yourself with positive information. Start opening the door to the 99% that's good, and then when you start doing that, you'll start closing the door to the 1% that's actually bad. Yeah. And I think that will help step you out of this fear. And that would be the fourth, I guess my fourth tip on how to get pregnant is to become aware. Become aware of what it is that you're feeling. So, you have, especially as you're trying to get pregnant, you're in the process, and even, post, obviously even more emotions, but it's like, what is it exactly that's going on in the mind, and so just start listening, start observing what it is you're telling yourself on a daily basis. And you can just do this by setting the intention that I want to start listening to my mind. Yeah. You just say, I want to start listening to my mind. Then you can start to begin to notice that the mind is saying, we better have sex tonight because I'm this many days, and there's just this constant projection into the future of like this projection into the future, which is basically pulling you out of the present moment, right? And every time you get pulled out of the present moment, you either move into a state of fear or worry or guilt or regret or whatever that may be, stress. When the body's stressed, it's just like less likely to be fulfilling its natural processes, right? So becoming aware of what it is you're feeling, and then beginning to just basically analyze or contemplate those emotions, and then that would be moving to probably the fifth, which would be to learn how to finally be free of them for good and let them go, right? So I think those are like pretty like 5 like really good tips, which is like I'll just repeat them, which is like desire, letting go of the desire, right? Just recognizing that there's a strong desire and want, then surrendering and trusting in the process that it's all going to happen, right? But we just have to get out of our way to allow it to happen, and then choosing the positive, which was like a really good one. It's like start filling your mind with more positive information. You're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself most with. So it's like, surround yourself with positive stories, read the books, listen to the podcasts of all the good. That'll start closing the door to the bad. And then awareness. You got to know what it is that you're telling yourself every single day. And if you don't know, then the subconscious is in control, right? So when we start to observe those thoughts, then we can finally then say, okay, well, what are these thoughts tied to, right? Which is something that you've already elaborated on, is like learning that all of this began somewhere in my life, right? And now I need to learn how to start doing the work to break free from it. Spiritual growth isn't just about crystals and essential oils and chants and mantras and guided meditations and retreats. It's about actually having the courage, to look within and be like, why am I the way I am, and how do I begin to heal from it, right? Yeah, for sure. Okay, good. So let's move into the second part, which is, now you have somebody that's coming to you who is in pregnancy and is in this like that struggled with pregnancy, but they're in this constant state of fear, and we've kind of touched upon it already, but and some of these same things apply here, right? But it's like let's just use fear, because when I tune into like pregnancy and like people being pregnant that have had fear, is just like, it's just like so huge.
Well, I feel like fear is just like such a rude emotion for like,
it is.
I feel like you always just find your way back to fear.
You do.
So yeah, I think that like when you look at the steps of like, I'm pregnant, I'm in fear, how do I let go of this fear? Like you said, I think that it's similar to the process of trying to get pregnant too, where it's recognizing this desire for this pregnancy to go in the best way that it can. And then once you're able to recognize that that's where I am, I'm in this desire, which is rooted in what? Well, it's rooted in fear, right? I'm desiring this really positive outcome because all I can think about is this really negative outcome.
Yeah.
And then once you're able to kind of like surrender into that feeling of, okay, fear's my best friend right now. It's living next to me. And being able to recognize and put intention into daily kind of check-ins with yourself where like, am I in fear today? And what do I need to give to myself today? Today doesn't need to be a day of just recognizing and letting go of fear. Or today, can I say, you know what? The fear can sit over here and I'm going to lean into the joy.
Yeah.
I'm going to
consciously.
I'm going to be purposeful in finding joy today.
Yeah.
And I think that is a really big part of it, is being able to say to yourself, I can be in joy with fear kind of sitting behind me.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like I can go and buy that little outfit that I want to, although I'm terrified that I'm going to buy that outfit in this pregnancy, something's going to happen. But I was able to create a moment of joy for myself. I was able to sit in this. And at the end of the day, if your pregnancy doesn't happen, because it happens, now you have this like token to walk away with, and now you have something like really tangible to remember your pregnancy by and be able to do more spiritual work with, right? You've quite literally given yourself a gift to be able to say, okay, now where do I go with being able to start healing and moving back into this journey all over again, right?
Yeah, and I think even recognizing that, even in the bad, there's going to be great gifts, and I think a lot of women probably really resist doing is looking at the worst case scenario. Yeah. Right. It's like looking at losing the baby. Like, I catch myself doing that even with my own kids. Right. It's like, one of my greatest fears, obviously, is like, something happening to my children. Right. And so, and I recognize that when that fear comes up, I recognize the ego pushing it away. Like I noticed it, and I'm like, whoa. It's like, I barely even had a second to realized the emotion was coming up, and my ego was already going, we're not thinking about that right now, and so one of the things that I've had to do to kind of let that go, and it's actually worked really well, is I've had to lean into that scenario, which is super scary to do, right?
Absolutely.
And so, but the reason I did it is because I didn't want to allow that emotion to kind of like continue to like have power over me, because what you hold in mind tends to manifest, right? So I think an important thing to realize is that even though these emotions are super, super scary, we still have to have the courage to lean into them, because we don't lean into them and let them go, then they may persist. Yeah. And then, what we resist persists. And so that could end up manifesting into our lives. So we have to ask for more of it, which is the exact opposite of what you want to do, right? Yeah. You want to just push it away the second it comes up. And so you got to lean into fear. You got to be aware that the fear is there, and you have to not resist it. And I think another really big thing to realize when it comes to like letting go of the desire, because a lot of people have trouble with the idea of letting go of desire. I mean, I struggle with letting go of desire for so long, and because we believe that if we let go of desire, we're not going to get what it is that we want, but it's actually the reverse. I think a good tool also is to recognize how you are going to feel when you become pregnant, and if you can start to tune into that emotion and say, I'm going to feel fulfilled or happy, then you can start asking the questions, well, why don't I feel that way now? Mm-hmm. So if you can start to feel the way you're going to feel once you're pregnant, before you're pregnant, then it's like you're basically going to manifest that pregnancy, because you already feel the way you feel. So part of the process would be to understand, how you're going to feel when you have the baby, for people that are already pregnant, So, and then you can start tuning into those emotions and start asking the questions. Well, why am I not feeling that now? So that you can start doing the work to begin feeling that way. Yeah. Yeah. So, let's wrap it up. So, like, where can people find you? You have this great private practice that you're starting. I know you're going on a mat leave here soon, but you're going to be coming out of that quickly, and back into the private practice. You got some mom groups and stuff like that. You're
Yeah,
gonna start running.
so right now, and what will continue is I run a mom circle at the Wellness Market. It's usually the second or third Monday of every month. We just quite literally called it Mama's Circle. I run it with a good friend of mine, Rochelle. So that can be, all that information can be found on my Instagram, which is alyssa.trittler.msw. And that's also where you can find me for booking private sessions as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks for taking the time to come out. I think you're like really you have like a niche market here, and it's something that is like so super needed, in this world where, we're just kind of like, especially I think in this space where we're just throwing so much information at people, and what really needs to happen is the healing needs to happen from within, and then it creates a space for everything to unfold. So I think you're doing like really, really great stuff, and I kind of look forward to keeping up with you on how things are going.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. Don't forget, if you haven't already, just click that subscribe button, and we'll see you again next week.